Welcome to Elevated Practice, where we interview masters and mavericks within the field of holistic medicine and uncover unconventional stories in the field of health and wellness. I'm your host, Gretchen Badami, and every episode I'll be interviewing clinicians, scholars, entrepreneurs, and educators who share their wisdom and ideas with you. Are you ready to elevate your practice? Let's begin today's episode. And today we are here with Elisabeth Rochat de la Vallée. Elisabeth Rochat de la Vallée studied philosophy, literature, and classics at Paris University, where she completed her master's degree in classics and in philosophy, and then in Chinese. At 20 years of age, Elisabeth began studying Chinese with Father Claude Larre, working with him on understanding and translating Chinese classical texts. In the early 1970s, Father Larre met Dr. Jean Schatz, a Western physician and acupuncturist with a special interest for the classical medical texts. At this time, Elisabeth began to embark on her study of Chinese medicine, and together these three individuals began the first study group of the classical medical texts in Paris, which led to the founding of the European School of Acupuncture in Paris in 1976. Resulting from this collaborative time period, these three wrote Survey of Traditional Chinese Medicine, published in 1979, and for the next 2 decades, under the auspices of the Ricci Institute in Paris, Father Larre and Elisabeth Rochat de la Vallée offered lectures, seminars, and conferences on Chinese classical thought throughout Europe and the U.S. In 1999, Elisabeth Rochat de la Vallée and Father Larre developed and published the Grand Ricci Dictionary, 2 years before his death. For the past 25 years, Elisabeth Rochat de la Vallée has continued to internationally lecture on Chinese medical and philosophical classics. Elisabeth Rochat de la Vallée believes that the real knowledge of the Chinese vision of life is useful not only to understand Chinese medicine from a scholarly point of view, but also to deepen one's practical approach and clinical skill. This is the reason why she always reads, translates, and explains texts which present precise pathology and its diagnosis and treatment as a reflection on the nature and meaning of human life. Elisabeth, it is an honor to have you here with us today. Welcome.
Gretchen, it's a real pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for inviting me. And sorry for my English.
Your English is fine. Thank you. We are so honored to have you here today. I wanted to give just a small bit of additional background about you before we get started, which is to say that most acupuncturists and East Asian medical practitioners know of your works and translations. You are one of the most prolific authors and translators within this field due to your over 50 years of work. I just, before we got started, I just went to my bookshelf and just pulled off a multitude of books of yours. You have written so many texts, I can't even go into them all, but The Heart, The 7 Emotions, The Secret Treatise of the Spiritual Orchid, The Extraordinary Fu. Rooted in Spirit, you have written so many of the seminal textbooks and translations that we in my generation and younger generations have studied to understand this medicine.
Thank you. Oh yeah, you last more than 75 years. Finally, you are well known everywhere.
You have outlasted all of the others and shared so much during this time.
Okay.
Because you have such a long professional career that spans over 50 years, this also makes you a very valuable historian. And today, as we talk, there are a few topics that I'd like to cover. First, I would love to hear anything that you would like to share about this fascinating time period where you and your translators, Father Larre and Dr. Schatz, infused within the European consciousness the very beginnings of Chinese medicine and philosophy. People of my generation now take for granted that we have these textbooks available to us. So I was wondering if you can talk a bit about the context of this time period where you were uncovering these textbooks and translating them and sharing them with professionals in Europe?
Yeah, in France, especially in Europe and especially in France, there is a long tradition of relationship with China and of scholarly relationships back even to the 17th century. It's really very early. And studying, of course, philosophical text, mainly Confucian text, or even sometime more later Confucian or Buddhist text, and quite few Taoist text. Because mainly a lot of Taoist texts were considered as part of a religion and not very serious and not very well known. And the text of medicine were absolutely not known and translated seriously at all. But in France also it started in the 20th century with Soulier de Morin, who was a French diplomat and understanding Chinese, speaking Chinese, and was in the French embassy in Japan and in China, and he was exposed to Chinese medicine because he was treated by Chinese medicine himself, and he started to try to understand, which is also something that we have in Europe, in the old Europe, when we do something, at least in ancient time, in the 20th century, we like to understand why we were doing that. So he tried to understand this medicine better and to transmit it in Europe. He was not even the first French to write about Chinese medicine. There were already a good book on Chinese medicine written in the 19th century by a military doctor, because, of course, with the army and invasion, they were also doctors, and some of them were very curious. But it's and Soulier de Morin just working with doctors who were homeopaths, had a kind of opening with them for understanding what was Chinese medicine, and which was the first time the practice of it for the first time in Europe. So really having a practice, starting with a medical doctor, which is also something unusual in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, mainly with medical doctor, trying to understand this medicine, to apply, to make acupuncture. But the text that were translated were more later text, and a lot about plants, location, and so on. Not exactly the text considered as the foundation of the medicine, and the real presentation of the root of this medicine, the view of the Qi, on the physiology, and the pathomechanism, and so on, and the reasoning also and knowledge using analogy. We are not familiar in the West with a real knowledge by analogy, which is possible under several strict conditions, of course. But we don't want to speak too much of that now. But in fact, it was this atmosphere. There were already some kind of attempt of translation of the classical Chinese text, especially the inner canon or classic of the Yellow Emperor, and even in the 50s, there some French, but sometimes translation from the Vietnamese or translation from with a kind of a commentaries and so on. So it was absolutely not a real access to the text themselves, and especially by understanding their meaning. Because when we look at the classical medical text, these texts were written by and for people who belong to the elite, to the upper class of the society, who were very well educated by the simple fact that they knew how to read and to write. To know how to read in Chinese doesn't take 1 year and to memorize the 25 or so signs. It needs years and years and years, because it is not an alphabetical language, and you have to learn to read to know thousands and thousands of characters. It's not impossible, but it takes time. And of course, to be really a scholar, you need years and years of study. You may know, for instance, one of character enough for your job, but that doesn't make you able to read the text. So now, coming from that, these people, they share a deep common culture because what they learned were not one character, then another one a day during 20 years. No, they learn these characters in text. And very soon, at the age of 10, they were already able to read texts which are considered as philosophical texts, of texts with a real, rich thinking, So it was serious about life, morality, Confucian view of life, and so on. And they learned through all these classical texts. So they share in common this culture. And this text, which is my field of expertise, the text written between the 5th and the 1st century BC. So all these texts are really the foundation for the Chinese thinking and the way the mind is, I will say, formatted. So is relate on this kind of vision of life, approach of the cosmic life that we find in this classical text. And in this classical text, so we have all the elaboration of the Qi. What is a Qi? The Qi is the cosmos, the yin-yang, the 5 elements of phases, all kind of things like that. As we have a lot of development on what we call the spirits, what is the human soul, what are we, what is our destiny, why are my spirit, my mind, my soul, and which in life, in death, all these kind of, whatever you call them, metaphysical or not, but all the question of any human civilization. So a lot of text on, for instance, what we call the spirit, and a lot of text also about the psychology, very fine and subtle analysis of the emotion and passion and desire in the human being and the effect on them, and especially on the order or disorder on the society. So the government, the good government of the world, being the ultimate goal of all this text and thinking, even in what we may call the proto-Taoism. So the text with the Taoist sensitivity, and which serve after as the basis of the building of what is called the Taoism. For instance, the Tao Te Ching, the Book of the Way and the Virtue, when they took all this background, this knowledge, their knowledge of emotion and Qi, spirit, and so on, and when they built theoretical approaches, and I take plural because there is several, which are not the same, but which are not exclusive one from the other. So it's the reason why I use rather to say approaches than approach, the theoretical approaches of medicine. So, for instance, the yin-yang and 5 elements of phases is one of them, a very important one, but one of them. So there is other, for instance, the 6 Qi, which are the very basis of the very famous Shanhanlun, and so on. So when they conceive this theoretical approach, they put in the medical books what they did not have in the other book. They just made sometime a reminding or a sentence and using to their knowledge, common knowledge, but they were no use to do that. As for instance, the treatise of medicine in the West, we do not recall a lot of things which are the very basic common knowledge of all the physicians, if you are an expert or whatever. So you don't remind them the alphabet. They know how to read. Now, when we are Westerner, and Westerner are very goodwill, and they want to go to the Chinese medical text, if they do not know the other text of the culture approach, they miss a lot of the meaning. They understand a very narrow meaning or a specific meaning in the text, in the medical text, which is very useful. and very true, but which is just part of it and not exclusive. Sometimes there is a lot of misunderstanding because they want to have one meaning, which is not possible also. So, for example, in English, if I say spirit, you don't know what I mean if you do not have a context. If the spirit is white or not, for instance. If it is a white spirit, it's not exactly the Holy Spirit. It's always need a context. So very often, approaching this classical medical text, people who are not trained enough in the classic text themselves, they miss points, they miss some understanding. And so what we realize when we were, so in the, let's see, in the very early 70s, when Dr. Schatz asked Father Larre and I to start to translate, to read, translate and explain the medical text, I had understood that it was impossible to approach them if we do not have a background of the meaning of the key concepts. And so it is the work that we try to do. And of course, to be very also strict on the medical approach. And the medical approach itself, we also need to practice to understand what it is. There is text. Of course, you may always translate, but sometimes you made an error in the translation without noticing it because you don't have the practice. So you don't know that they are speaking of, oh yes, this charging pulse and the reaction of the patient of this kind of thing. Yes, I know what it is because I saw it, I felt it, so I hear it. So you know what it is, but when it is written, it doesn't ring any bell. So you translate the text. Translation is correct, but meaningless. And so it is another danger. So it is the reason why we try to do this kind of team with Father Larre, who was an expert in the classical Chinese and especially in the Taoist early text, with Dr. Schatz, who was a medical doctor and practitioner in acupuncture, and who was trained also, in France and also in Taiwan a little bit. That time it was only possible in Taiwan. So we decided to work together. And at first, there is several other people interested in Chinese medicine and knowing enough of classical Chinese. So we were a group meeting every week, at least in the beginning. And we really tried to understand this text. And it was very difficult because we were as in something absolutely unknown. Now it looks very easy to read, but at first it was not. And trying always to have the double approach from the understanding of the key concept in the Chinese ancient civilization, classical civilization, and understanding the link with the practice, Dr. Jean Schatz and Father Claude. And I was young. I was a bit foolhardy and bold and daring, so I said, okay, I know, I can do it. And also I was personally interested because after studies in Paris of Western classics, literatures, and philosophy, and I was, it's a kind of a crossroad. What is the meaning of that? What is the meaning of life? Always a question. So, and what we have, in fact, in the West, and I was really very disturbed by that, and I did not like that at all, is that there is a kind of gap between thinking and doing. There is not a strong, natural, constant link. I felt that perhaps if I go enough through this Chinese approach, I may really have what I call now a wisdom in action. So to have enough not only knowledge but to know how to not only to understand why we have this effect when we puncture this part, what kind of mechanisms with the Qi and vision and map of the body they have, but also that it is something that makes sense, that we can live with our own life, and which give us also a reason and direction to live our own life. So that in Chinese medicine, as you said in the beginning, not only I saw, and also with Schatz and Zola, we saw a medicine, not only a way to treat people and to treat them at a more human level, so which is also important, not only a way to build what we may call the medicine of the future, if the Western medicine is able to accept another medicine and to discuss really with it and not just to colonize it, or, just not to take something and to integrate in its own approach. But even above that, it was a way through that to go deep in the human life and of what may be, what makes us recover the movement of life inside of us. Because you cannot heal someone, really heal, if this patient doesn't move interiorly at the depth of himself, at the level of the spirit or Shen. But if there is not a shift, something is moved and there is a shift, and the shift is that this person is closer to their own life, and being closer to their true life, they are closer to this axis of life, to this way of life, whatever you want to call it, but which is given the direction and the meaning of who you are. And to be a human practitioner, for instance, when we practice a human medicine given to a human being by another human being, you cannot escape that. Yeah? If not, you can treat. You may sometimes cure some disease or some symptoms, but something will come back the same or not. And it is what is said in the classics, so chapter 13 of the Wen and so on. It is written also in a lot of texts. They knew that perfectly. So this was the beginning of this kind of story. And so during years, we start to study, to try to understand, to translate. And after some years, in the meantime, I've spent 1 year in Taiwan for the modern spoken Chinese. After several years, we start to teach what we had found in this text. And little by little, so it was the beginning of the European School of Acupuncture, which survived until last year, so 48 years, and always keeping the same orientation to try to understand deeply this text, to the root of the Chinese medicine, teaching from the root. And you continue in Europe and in several countries with people interested in this approach, which is always what you say holistic, what is the meaning of holistic, but what I call the sign of Qi, what the patient is showing you through their body, all that is sign of Qi that the practitioner has to understand and analyze and interpret and correctly, but according to the Chinese classical approach, not to the Western one. Same thing in psychology. I have nothing against Western psychology at all. But this approach of emotion, for instance, in classical Chinese medicine, is not the Western modern psychology approach. It's another one. It is always interesting and rich to study this approach, which fits with the global approach of this medicine, the movement of Qi, the organization of the interaction, the way to understand order and disorder, and to make a diagnosis and to find how to settle back in the right order the movement of Qi in the patient who was unable to do that by themselves.
I love this story of how you came to this medicine and how you originally started translating and studying this medicine and understood the applicability of Chinese thought and philosophy to, of course, the entire whole of the spirit and to our universe and the world as a whole, and to all humans, regardless of whether we are talking of Chinese philosophy or other forms of medicine, the idea of wisdom in action and understanding philosophy and applying that as a practice to one's life to live your most authentic life is very profound. And people could probably meditate on that idea for their entire life, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I tell you, it's never finished. Yes.
It will never be over.
Yeah, and which is also interesting. It's that when we approach the reality, what is the way we approach it might be a Western way or Chinese way, for instance, the way of the Qi. So, but in any case, it has to help the people to come back to themselves. Has to help myself to come back to myself, and coming back to myself, to oneself, what we are. So that all this approach doesn't tell you that you have to become Chinese, which is impossible, or even that you have to become Taoist or Confucian or Buddhist or this and that. You do what makes sense for you.
Yes.
And you have to be, and we have to experience it. Because if we do not live it, we don't go deep enough.
Let's pause for a moment to extend a big thank you to our sponsor, Handcraft Health. I prescribe a lot of herbal medicine in my practice, and quite frankly, I don't want to spend the overhead keeping hundreds of herbs and supplements on hand. Since the pandemic, I do a lot of telehealth consults and ship patients their prescriptions. Handcraft Health has been my lifesaver. It allows me to have a successful and streamlined practice and saves me money and office space. I am not tech savvy, but the platform is really straightforward for me to write and easy for my patients to pay online and receive their orders at home. It's free for practitioners to open a Handcraft Health account. It's just handcraft.health and only takes a few minutes to sign up. It's one of the easiest choices you'll make to do what you do best. And now, back to our episode. Yes. And this idea is so applicable to all practitioners of all medical modalities, regardless of how you are treating. And you have mentioned this idea of the great physician and the practitioner and patient dynamic, and having the physician understanding themselves, cultivating their insights and cultivating their intuitions to focus their heart and focus their spirit in order to be able to treat the patient. Can you speak a little bit about the idea of the Qi and the Shen, the spirit, and the ways the practitioner may cultivate that or actualize that in relationship with how they then interact with the patient?
In fact, this name, the white practitioner, comes directly from the very well-known foreword of Sun Miao. Yeah. And if you read this very splendid text from Sun Miao, when you see that for the practitioner, he recommends a lot of cultivation and lecture, of course, to know the medical books, but to know a lot of other things and to practice things. And so the idea is that you have to really be open on the life itself and to have cultivated yourself. And so, why that? Because if you do not have an order in yourself, if you can order the Qi in yourself, you cannot be a good practitioner. I will say for a double reason. One is that you will be disturbed in your mind. For instance, when I look at this sign of Qi that we may call symptoms or whatever on the patient, when I hear the sound of the voice or various sounds of the body, when I look at the complexion or at something in the eyes, some brightness in the eyes, when I palpate the abdomen or the pulses, and so on, when I ask questions, what is making the acuity of my perception, and what is given to my perception? It's what does make my perception acute and accurate? What I have to to make an interpretation. We always have to make an interpretation. The reality is something that we cannot reduce to one expression in the world. This is a story which is a little bit amazing about that. So when they were in 17th, 18th century, they were physicians also, European physicians or people knowing a little bit of medicine in Europe and who went in China. So even with missionaries. And they were puzzled by the Chinese medicine. No, it was so totally different. But they saw that they took pulses. And they said, fantastic. Now we can speak because we have something in common. We take the pulses. And in fact, absolutely not. Because the meaning, the way to analyze the pulses was totally different in the Western medicine and in the Chinese medicine. So the Westerner may have said that in my imagination. They said, how could you say something about all the organs where the blood is only related to the heart, beating of the heart? And certainly the Chinese said, how stupid are you not to see that what is a heart is the unity of all the organs, and that we may analyze to separate them and to have some kind of distinction. And there is a lot of qualities that you know about all the body, all the life, not only the body, but the life of this human being, because his heart is his heart, is his self. Sure, that was the end, of course. They say, okay, they don't know how to take the person. Okay, they don't know how to take the person. What I mean is that even when we are not aware of that, there is an interpretation. And sometimes this interpretation is really printed ourselves from the very beginning, from the first day we went to school or even earlier, because it is a common way to look at that. We look at the reproduction of the body with the muscles, but it is something that we never saw in reality. Even when you open an animal, it's not exactly like the image on the wall of the school, but it is a way to do something and to understand how it works. We have a kind of interpretation, and we need an interpretation. And the Western medicine is also an interpretation, and a good one, yes. But the Chinese medicine has its own interpretation, and a good one too. So when I look at a patient, I look at the sign of the Qi and I do my interpretation according to the classical Chinese patterns. If I do that according to the Western pattern, I am no more in classical Chinese medicine. Yeah. I may be in something in the middle. Why not? That I may conceive and practice. I have nothing against, but we have to give it a specific name, a right name for what it is. So with this approach of the pattern of the Qi, I mentioned the yin-yang and 5 phases or elements recently because it's an important one and the way it's well known by name in the West. But each pattern, I will have my analysis enable me to see in each manifestation of Qi if this Qi belongs to one or another of the elements, so comes from the disorder of one another organ or function, and so on and so on. So after that, of course, it's very subtle, complex, and there is a lot of things that, of course, but it is through this kind of tool, with this kind of tool that I can make analysis, understanding what is in disorder, because I have a model of orders, and I will try to put back things, to put back the Qi in the good order. Now, for this interpretation to be accurate as well as acute, so I need not only a good physical functioning of my sense organ, but I need my mind to be clear, my emotion to be calm, my spirit to be high, So if I am upset by something, or if I am angry, or whatever, we are disturbed by something, we cannot see clearly. We just miss something in the patient, or we misinterpret something. We are not clear. So I will say first at all, we need to be clear to take care of the tool that we are. We are the tool. Now, the second reason is that when we have a patient and a practitioner face to face, what we have is two masses of Qi in movement and transformation, and communication. Because
Yes.
everything is Qi. So if everything is Qi, we can see everything as Qi, but Qi always in movement and transformation. The body itself is seen as a body of Qi. The body is a form always in transformation. In the inside, but also in the outside, of course. I don't change. I'm not transformed. I don't change from one day to another day. But if I do not look myself in my mirror during 6 months or 1 year, I can see that there is a constant transformation. The manifestation at the surface, this is constant transformation. So we are two masses of Qi in movement, transformation, and communication. Transformation, because as soon as we have two Qi, which are not the same, for instance, at the very origin, yin-yang, when we have two Qi together, there is interaction and transformation. And it is life. It is called life. Building of life, of a living form of life, and of that from the beginning to the end of this specific form of life. So now, whatever you think of psychological effect or whatever you call that in Western medicine, you cannot say that there is no relation. There is an exchange of Qi. Of course, there is a relationship that we cultivate. We are completely aware of. I'm supposed to be nice and careful. I'm supposed not to swear entering the treatment room or whatever, So, and I check my attitude, my gesture, my mind, and so there is a lot of things that compose my attitude, my gesture, to be calmer, to be more ordered, which is absolutely good. But in the same time, what is the reality? The reality is that myself as this movement of Qi as it is right now. So I may try to do this and that, but it doesn't change what is in my heart, for instance. And if I am not really upright, there is something, the exchange of Qi, which is not very upright too. So what I mean is that the Qi which are passing through the patient and the practitioner are not only the Qi we are aware to change when we look in the eyes of each other, when, for instance, I put my fingers with my blood and Qi on the pulses where there is a blood and Qi, and the blood and Qi is a whole person, kind of exchange, or we speak, but freely, so, and or asking questions. So there is exchange, but there is also even through that some kind of exchange at the level we don't know what it is. I don't know exactly how are my Qi, but the only way is to try to put them in better order day after day, every day. And the one who really wants to be a great physician or a therapist, a healer, just to test oneself to the axis of life every day. And when I say every day, it is every day. You may jump one because there is something very special happening, but it has to be very accidental and once upon a time. If not, we lose them. We lose it, So every day we need to have at least a short moment of silence, I will say, or whatever it is, to come back to oneself, to shut to the exterior, as they said, the text, to shut doors and windows, which means also to shut all the sense organs, and also the opening of the heart to some kind of thought and so on, to concentrate on the root, on myself. And so, how do we do that? each one has its own approaches. It might be meditation, it might be prayer, it might be whatever, or just silence, or to examine what happened in the day and so on. Yeah, whatever it is, we need this kind of anchorage, at least a short moment, or if we can. So, short moment when we are tired, and more when we are not so tired. So I think that whatever we do, we need to that. It may also be a kind of practice. Depends how you practice. It is whatever you may go to work or to make a calligraphy, but it is a way to do it. If you do a calligraphy, but for the performance, I want to do right, to have the best way. So, no, you are just concentrated in the outside. Whatever you do, it is a way to come back to yourself. And it is why to readjust my life, because life, I am a living being, so life is in myself. And if I forget that, the problem is my knowledge will lead me to too much abstraction. And one of the problems of the abstraction is that it may include dehumanization also. So now, this kind of emptiness, kind of what I call silence, is a way to empty the heart. And so, this way that I empty my heart every day makes me able to perceive the patient at another level. But it is not because I want or because I know. It is just what happened. And perhaps we have here one of the sources of the good intuit. When we are with the patient, we all have the same experience. Time to time, there is an idea popping in the mind. It might be disturbed by my own emotion, my own knowledge and so on. But it may also come from what I feel in my emptiness that I cultivate and which is always more and more in me, what I feel in this emptiness coming from life itself, that it's wrong, or the question to ask, or it is this and that. Sometimes it is a word that we say, a sentence or word that we say to the patient. We don't try to do some kind of psychology. We just say that because it comes to our mind, to our heart. And we just said it very simply, and we forget it. And sometimes it moves the patient, sometimes not. And this is a one shot, When we have this kind of intuition, you cannot reuse it, never. The prescription date is immediately. But what we have to cultivate is this emptiness, which enable you to be receptive to all what I am unable to know and to analyze in the consciousness. When I observe a patient, I cannot observe absolutely everything. It will take days and days and be useless. I do my diagnosis without that. But all what is emanating from the patient comes somewhere in my ability to welcome unconditionally, to be empty of everything. Of course, it's never perfect, yes. Okay. But we try to work on that every day. So for me, the great practitioner is the one who always has this double approach, is full of knowledge and putting this knowledge at the service of the diagnosis and the treatment. And it is empty in their heart to be able to really let their spirit illuminate not only the working of the mind and of the sense organ, but also to receive all what I don't know I receive, and to shape what really will be the diagnosis and the treatment. Same thing in the treatment. When you manipulate the needles, from where is coming the value, the quality of your gesture? It's coming of your practice, of what you learn, what you practice, your experience. It's coming of your concentration, and it's coming of your emptiness. What is the intention of the great therapist, of the great practitioner? Perhaps to have none.
What beautiful knowledge this is. We learn this in school. We learn some Tai Chi, We are told to meditate. We are
Absolutely.
told to, cultivate our spirit, cultivate our Shen.
Certainly.
But I think, and I can speak as a practitioner, that when we get out into practice and you enter into life, and as a business person, you may remember to tell your patients to cultivate their spirit and suggest to them to meditate and suggest to them to do some physical activity. But how often do we reflect back that we as the practitioner must be equally as mindful in every moment with our interactions and with our spirit with the patient for both our Qi and for theirs? This is just the constant,
Absolutely.
the
Because
reminder for the practitioner.
sometimes we may have the idea that, okay, now that I know, and it's enough. I don't need anything else. I don't have time to waste with that. I better to learn another thing, to have another certificate, to follow another class. Nothing wrong in following classes. And we say, okay, that is not necessary. It's if I have time, it's a kind of leisure. Yes, it's a kind of luxury. No, it is a route.
Yeah. And it's very easy to extrapolate this information and then apply it to what we see occurring in the conventional medical system when we think about what is lost when a patient may go to see a doctor and they have no relationship with that doctor, and they have 5 minutes for the doctor to look at the chart, and there is no time given to the patient-practitioner relationship or the cultivation of the spirit, or to the patient's spirit, to making sure that they are healthy and emotionally strong despite their physical disease.
Absolutely.
There's so much to think about here in terms of the way medicine is practiced in our modern day and age.
And I will give you an example of a friend of mine, a Western surgeon, and very open. His wife, they are retired now, but was a medical doctor and an acupuncturist, but himself he never practiced anything of Chinese medicine or even. He was a very good surgeon with experience and study in France and in the US, and very top level. And when you are a surgeon, you have no time to spend with your patient. You hardly see them before the surgery, and you don't see them after. So you see them for consultation and so on, but after that, okay. So when all the colleagues were golfing or whatever, each Saturday morning he left quite early, went to the 3 clinics in which he was surgery operating, and always sit down at the bed of each patient he had given surgery during the week, and spend the time what was necessary, depends on the state of the member. But sit down, start to speak or to communicate, and after that the other one, after that in the other clinic. So generally he finish by the beginning of the afternoon or just at lunchtime. So he did that, and he said that is the very minimum. We cannot do less, even it's not enough. And he was purely in the Western medicine, It's very possible to have spirit in Western medicine. And I like this story because it comes from who he was, really. And that cultivation, for him, it was impossible not to do that or to do less.
And I think that for the conventional medical system, but even when we look at practicing holistic medicine and the way that we set up our practices and the time that we spend with patients, it is possible if the practitioner cultivates an awareness of this, right? To do their own intuitive work, to practice their own mind-body connection. I love what you said earlier when you said, when I feel in my emptiness, deep within my life itself, then I have cultivated my intuition. Everyone is capable of doing this, regardless of what field of medicine they are in.
Sure, especially if we are not doing it for something. We are doing it because it is like that.
Yes. Thank you so much. I am going to go back and continually listen to this over and over as a reminder.
In those
moments when I forget. And hopefully our listeners will be inspired to as well, because this is, I think, the foundational importance of our practice and practice of medicine. Of course, we must have the knowledge and we must have the memorization, but who are we and how do we cultivate our spirit? This is of paramount importance.
Cultivate our spirit is cultivate life in us.
As we wrap up, I have two quick questions for you. One is there anything unique or interesting about yourself that you'd like to share with our listeners that is unrelated to your career or medicine? Anything they would like to know about you?
Oh, I don't know, but I'm have nothing unique or extraordinary. So something that I never gave up is friendships, to see friends, to have friends and to see friends, which is also something for me, part of the same thing of life, because we do not exist if it is not in the human relationships.
Yes.
And to try to be open to what your friends may tell you. If a friend tell me, okay, yes, it's exaggerate a little bit, that they try to say, yeah, perhaps not, but perhaps, so joy when we are with friends, even when there is difficulties or painful things, we always may have some kind of smile, some kind of joy together, which is the best way to nourish life.
Yes.
So I will say that I never, when I was overworking a lot, I never give up on seeing friends.
Yes. And I know this about you because I've known you now for a bit over a decade, and I've seen you many times in California. And the context in which I know you is that you do maintain your lifelong friendships with your good friends, and you are such a genuine human. And that is something that I so appreciate about you, that you are a brilliant scholar and a prolific translator and writer, but at your core, you are a beautiful and earnest human being, which is fantastic.
That is the best compliment you can do. Thank you so much. I really appreciate.
Thank you so much. And that also answered my my second question, which was going to be, what do you do to stay healthy? But I think, your joy, your spirit, those human connections, that's
yes.
And
I was very lucky also. I had a real good life. I had parents, they love each other and they love us, my brother and I. And my brother loved me, I love him. So it's there is always, of course, a problem family, but always at the very basis, from the very moment of my conception, they were loved. And that gives you an incredible foundation and strength for all your life. Because when it is lacking, you see that something is really lacking. And I was also lucky enough. Of course, during my life, I have my share of grief and so on. But nothing really stating, as I may see some friends of mine, for instance, when you lose your children or whatever, some kind of excruciating pain that life, I never had that. So I'm very lucky.
Well, you have a bright and shining Shen spirit. So,
well, put on your sunglasses, please.
Well, thank you so much. If our patients want to learn more about you and take any classes or listen to any lectures, do you have a website that you can share with our listeners?
Which is Elisabeth Rochat.com.
And Elisabeth has many, many books for all of our listeners. Please go out there and take a look at the plethora of books that she has and lectures that are accessible both online and via Zoom and also in person. She is continuing to lecture, hopefully for many, many years to come.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode of Elevated Practice. I'd like to express my gratitude to our guests today and always for sharing their wisdom with all our listeners. I hope you were able to take away some insights, practical knowledge, or inspirational ideas that you can apply right away to elevate your own practice. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about elevated practice. If you have an idea for an episode or a recommendation for a guest, please respond in the comments or message me, Gretchen Badami, directly through social media. Thank you, and I can't wait for you to hear our next episode.